20 years ago, I was an undergraduate at the Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, where I was a psychology and English major and a minor in religion. If you would have known me in college, you would be in raucous laughter knowing that I had a minor in religion. That was not on my radar screen, although my father was a priest. It was the furthest thing from my vocational track. But those religion courses that I took, one was on the Holocaust taught by Professor Richard Rubinstein. And if you know, he was famous during the 60s and the early 70s, where he was on the cover of Time magazine for the whole God is dead understanding. And it was an amazing class. We disagreed because he happened to believe that the basis for human dignity was military might. I don't necessarily subscribe to that belief, but nonetheless, an amazing professor, an amazing class. And so it led me deeper into these religion courses. Another course I took was on death and dying, and the Kubler-Ross book of the stages of grief. And there was an exercise given to me in that class that I continue to this day. And I do it about once every 3 or 4 years. And as a 19-year-old, it was very fascinating to watch us talk about death and dying. So you have like 18 to 21-year-olds in this class, maybe some 22-year-olds. Have you ever met any of those folks? It's funny to talk about death with them because they're immortal. They're invincible. Nobody that's 19 years old thinks about death. And they're not that much different than we are because we don't think about it that often. But to have a class full of that age really considering it and thinking about it was a fascinating time for me. And the exercise was to write my own eulogy. And I've kept that practice up. And as a 19-year-old, to write your own eulogy, what I was struck by was how little I spent my time on in a given day matched up with what I'd written on my eulogy. I was trying to make a life. Here I was trying to get a degree, graduate, and make what? Money. So that my parents were off the hook finally. Or as my dad liked to say, you are off the hook, you better make money. And I thought about what I then wrote in my eulogy. And we talked about this in class. And it's probably some of the genesis of what you get from me on a weekly basis ad nauseum. It's all about what? Relationships. Everything in my eulogy was about good relationships, what I wished for. And I was 19. I had not yet met Jennifer. I was a year and a half off. But I had hopes that I would be a good friend, a good husband, a good parent, and that I would be good at whatever vocation and respected in the community. And so I think about it as I've written my eulogy over the years, it hasn't changed that much. But also, I would think as I would grow and hopefully mature, that all that time that I noticed that I was spending on things that would change. And I have to be completely honest with you, boy, I still waste a lot of time on things that don't matter. On things that don't kind of fall within that reality. And I think that's what Jesus' words to us in Luke's gospel today remind us. I think it's about Jesus kind of helping us to pay attention. Listen to what it says. It starts off with Jesus' most popular refrain to human beings and friends. Do not be afraid. I think Jesus knows us. Because most of the time we're afraid. Most of the time we're worried about this, worried about that. Anxiety seems to bubble up everywhere. What if? So that's the first thing he says. Don't be afraid. Then he says this crazy thing that we just skim over sometimes. it is your Father's good pleasure to give you. And I would fill in, if I was writing this, I would think it's your Father's good pleasure to give you lots of work to earn your way into heaven. Isn't that what, that's the way we behave. That's the way we behave, that's what we think it is apparently, because everybody's just kind of working really hard to earn their way into something. But instead, it doesn't say that. It says, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. That the kingdom is shared with us. Do not be afraid, you're in. Then he goes on, talks about our treasures. And this is where our culture and our religion are at odds. Or I'll even say, because so many people are afraid of that religion, our culture and what we say we follow, who we believe in, and how we live our lives are at odds. Because it goes on to say, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus got it backwards, right? Because we know that we put our treasure where our heart is, right? Think about how crazy this is, or how backwards it is to everything that we say. Because we live in a town, a life, and a culture that is all about we being in charge, about especially of our money and our treasure. And so what Jesus is saying, don't worry, don't be afraid, the kingdom is ours, and put your treasure where you want your heart to be. Because the reality is that your heart follows it. Jesus is a realist. That's what I think we forget. Sometimes we kind of get stuck on this image of Jesus, and we forget that Jesus was a man, and he walked the earth, and he understood the power of treasure, and the power of money, the power of time, the power of our talents. And he knew that if we put those a place, we would follow it. Our heart would follow it and be drawn to it. And that is just the way we work. And so I'll share with you that I don't remember sermons. I really am flattered when people come up. 4 months ago you said, I go, yeah, I don't remember. But I remember another sermon that somebody else gave about this text about 25 years ago. And she said in the sermon, she said, where do you want your heart to be? Give to that. And when we talk about giving in the church, especially in New Hampshire, folks, we should have self-esteem issues because we are last on the list of states in charitable giving. Last. So I digress a little bit, but wow. So that's amazing. Every time I see that, I go, is that really true? But they keep saying it, and it keeps coming out, so it's true. But as we think about this, and think about our treasures and what we care about and where we go, I think it's very important for us to think about stewardship. And whenever we talk about stewardship, everybody hears money. And they go, oh, Stevens is talking about money again in church. Well, the only thing Jesus talked about more than money was love, because he knew it was powerful. But money, I want to tell you, is the easy part of stewardship. It's the easy part of giving. I want to think about the talents and the gifts that you are given and your time. So for me, when I want to move from just talking stewardship and kind of the money phrase, because everybody sticks their fingers in their ears when we start doing that. So I'm going to go from preaching to meddling now, because I'm a dad, and when we start talking about stewardship and giving, where money is easy for me, just writing a check, give it away. I have a 17-year-old daughter. Hi, Hannah. Sorry. She's going to college in a year. That stinks for me because I like her. And yet that's part of the deal. So there's a part of me with my kids that I'm like, wait, they don't belong to me. They're not my possessions. I don't get to keep them around. They're not going to just take care of me. Really? And then I think about it, and I can kind of get into that hoarding mentality. I was like, I'll just hoard my kids. I'll just keep them right here. And I'll just hoard them, and I'll just say, they're mine. And just imagine how fruitful and wonderful my relationship with Hannah will be if I do that. She'll love me. Stay inside, don't go outside, and no college, no way. And I realized that if I do that, if I live that way, remember that eulogy that I was talking about? There's a relationship that won't thrive because it's about sharing, and it's about giving. And Jesus seems to know that. It's not about give or else, it's about give and find life. Everybody tells me around here, even colleagues say, don't talk about the tithe. It'll scare everybody. Don't talk about that 10%. You can't do that. And I'm like, why not? You should give 10% away. But what I'm saying is you shouldn't necessarily give it all to the church. But if you're not giving away 10% of your income and your time and your talent, you're missing out, is what I want you to hear. Not that shame on you. I'm just saying you're missing out. Because when I asked a seminary professor about how much I should give when I was in seminary, he said something back to me that I looked at him, I said, what are you talking about? But I said to him, I said, how much should I give? And he said, well, Rob, how much joy can you stand? And I went, what? And you may look at me and go, what are you talking about? Because the outcome of giving is joy. And what I've learned is that, well, then we'll all give 10%. This will be great. We'll just be joyous. But what I've realized, and this is a little pessimistic, but it's true, is some people can't handle much joy. And so it's a great question. How much joy can you stand? I love the story that Abby Siegfried, our organist and choir director, tells us. She's a PhD. She works at Phillips Andover, perhaps the most prestigious prep school in the country. And she walks around there. If you know Abby, she walks around there like this. And people think she's insane because it's Phillips Andover. Got to be serious. Been in those situations? The Episcopal Church. I'm not so sure if we walk out into the streets of Portland and go, hey, what do you think of the Episcopal Church? The first thing you think of, do you think of joy? I think we're in a time and a place where they say, what's an Episcopal Church? And if they go past that, they'll go, isn't there a building up there? But do they talk about the character? Do they talk about who we are? And I think it is about our giving. And please hear me say to you, not give or else, but wow, it's awesome. It's the way we're put together. This understanding that Jesus is giving us today is not about saying, if you want to get into the kingdom, give me your money, give me your time, give me your energy. It's about saying, this is the way you are created. And what I've realized about this idea of the tithe is 10% is, this is where it gets hard. It's the starting place. The starting place. So I encourage you today to examine your life and think about it just for a minute in a different way than you've ever thought about it. Instead of, the church needs my money, because guess what? We don't. We don't need your money. That's not what it's about. Yes, we have budgets and things like that, but you know what? God will do what God will do, what we give. It's not up to us. That's the big lie that I love in our culture, is that I'm a big golfer. I like watching the majors. And I love watching the golf because I watch this lie that gets perpetuated on TV all the time, especially during golf tournaments for some reason. Financial security. That is such a lie. It is not possible. Because guess what? Tomorrow you could get sick. Tomorrow you could lose your job. Tomorrow your industry could become obsolete. And it's not that we don't work hard and plan. I'm not saying to not do that. But this idea that you can attain financial security is kind of crazy. And that just doesn't get said very much, and we kind of buy into it as a way of life. And what I will tell you is, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You know, do you really want your heart to be in your bank account? But let's face it, that's where most of America's heart is. It's where mine gets stuck occasionally. So the question we have is, at the end of our days, when we write our eulogy and things are said about us, what do we want people to say? Whether that's about us individually or about us corporately as a community of faith. The great news is that as we examine our lives, and I encourage you, write your eulogy. Examine your life. Where's that 100% of what you have going? Is 10% going out to serve others so that you may experience joy? And then ultimately, ask the question, where do you want your heart to be? And give to that. Amen.